Hey everyone, welcome to another top 10 video. Today, the top 10 single target removal spells in Modern. I laugh because it's very specific, and it's very specific because there's just so much removal in Modern. So many different types of removal in Modern, so I said, you know what, we'll probably split up this list into two videos. This one will be just single target removal, creature, permanent, whatever it is, and then I'll make another list that are sweepers, more or less, or multiple targets. And even in this list, it was really hard to come up with a top 10. There's, you know, I didn't want to make a list of just the top 10 cards used in Modern because it's kind of boring and you can figure that out by going to MTG Goldfish or some other website. I wanted to pick the cards that I generally go to when I'm building a deck, you know, in specific colors as my removal spells of choice. So that's what's making up this top 10, and hopefully I'll highlight some cards that you don't see often. And of course, the honorable mentions. There's just so many cards I want to put on this list, but for one reason or another that I'll get into for a lot of them, when we get to the top 10, I didn't include them. But there they are, just so you don't say, hey, Delver, you didn't even think about this card, what are you, crazy? No, I did, I just didn't put it in my final top 10. Before we get to the top 10 list, though, before we get to anything in my videos, as usual, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that red subscribe button down below. And that like button, I always ask, but there's a reason why. It's not just because I like to see big numbers. It's because those numbers help YouTube make others find my content, helps grow the channel. And that's ultimately what I want to do, and ultimately what you want to, you know, do for me as well. I really appreciate that support. Alright, so, number 10. I really want to include this into the list. Not a lot of people use it, but I really think it's underutilized in decks that don't have access to, like, black or white in particular. Reality Shift has actually been a great sideboard card for me. This is definitely not a card I would play main board. But when I'm playing a mono blue deck or blue-red deck or just a blue X deck, just a two-color deck, Reality Shift is actually great at removing essentially any creature. As long as it doesn't have hexproof, basically, it can be removed by Reality Shift, and you're replacing it essentially with a 2/2 token. Yes, there are gods where that, you know, that token ends up being a creature, and they can flip it over, and you just kind of start from square one. But in all the times I've ever used Reality Shift, it has never happened. I have never had an opponent manifest that card into a creature. So Reality Shift has actually really pulled its weight, again, in very specific decks. I want to make that clear. I don't want you to eat my head off. But exiling is great. You get around indestructible. You get around having to target based on, you know, having to remove based on damage. It's just a nice catch-all. And if you haven't already tried Reality Shift in decks that don't have access to more efficient removal, you should really give it a shot, because it's been a 2 or 3 of in a lot of my sideboards ever since I started playing with it earlier this year. Number 9, Dismember. Although it has seen less and less play, it still shows up, and it's still pretty decent against essentially every creature. Again, gets around indestructible. If you're not playing black, you can still play it because you can pay 4 life, which is kind of painful, but you can do it. And if you are playing black, well then great, because it's going to be much cheaper for you in terms of life total. And it's just nice, you know, instant removal of almost every creature. You could respond, you could respond to creatures getting bigger. You could respond after damage on the stack, whatever it is. Well, actually, damage is not on the stack unless the damage is dealt after that. You could, you know, just kill creatures very elegantly, and I just like it. It's instant speed. It's a nice sideboard card. Some crazy people put it in the main, but it's a nice sideboard card, and I still think it's pretty relevant for essentially, you know, destroying most or killing off most creatures in the meta today. Number 8, Vindicate. I personally like Vindicate. It's destroy target permanent, any permanent. There's no restriction. It'll kill everything. Yes, it's 3 mana, which isn't the most efficient, but when you're playing black-white, sometimes that's just a great removal card. I have been blown out by Vindicate more than I would like to admit, especially when it's like 2 or 3 in a row, which is brutal. They just kill off your lands, and essentially you have no way to respond or no way to come back. Very hard to defend yourself from Vindicate. Veil of Summer is really the only way, or you permission it out. Whatever it is, I really like Vindicate in decks that don't have better removal options. So yeah, this Vindicate is my number 8. I don't have much to say. I really like it. I think it's really elegant. Just 3 words: destroy target permanent. It's beautiful. Speaking of destroying permanents, Assassin's Trophy, which I tend to always prefer over Abrupt Decay. I guess in theory you could Abrupt Decay in this slot, but I chose Assassin's Trophy in particular. I just like that it goes above and beyond in the sense that, yeah, okay, it can be countered. I'm not too worried about that. I have access to green. I could always play Veil of Summer as well. Yeah, it's not as mana efficient at that point, but so besides the point. Assassin's Trophy targets basically every permanent you want. Destroy target permanent and opponent controls. So it's Vindicate, but 1 mana less. And yeah, the downside is it's kind of like the Path to Exile trade-off, right? They could go and get a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle their library. Fine. Generally speaking, though, you're not going to like destroy like a 1/1 flying token, right? You're destroying something that's really problematic that you absolutely need to get rid of. And you're probably not going to be destroying like a DRC or something like that. You're destroying a creature that you can't kill any other way, or you're getting rid of a planeswalker or an artifact or enchant. It's just a very nice, elegant, instant speed catch-all that you could do at the beginning of your opponent's upkeep, you know, just so they, you know, whatever it is, just to kind of fudge around with them. You can do it with Assassin's Trophy. So I prefer it over Abrupt Decay because Abrupt Decay has that limitation. It's also non-land permanence, whereas this one attacks everything. Assassin's Trophy is just a great removal card, and I feel it's underplayed because people are overvaluing its downside. I think it's fine. I think it's perfectly fine. You should try it out more if you're afraid of it because of that downside. Number 6, Solitude. So Solitude didn't become the all-ending main white removal card or creature removal card that's going to end it all. It's the Swords to Plowshares, a modern. I mean, it kind of is, I guess, but far, far, far worse. And we can tell just by the amount of times it's seen play and in the numbers it's seeing play. I still see Solitude being played alongside Path to Exile. It hasn't gone rid of Path to Exile altogether, and that's obvious why. I mean, it's card disadvantage, you know, because you generally are evoking it. Because you generally are wanting to use it before turn 5 when you have 5 mana available to you, assuming you hit all your land drops on top of it. So I think players have realized it's a nice balance with Path to Exile. If you're playing, you know, mono white or white black, whatever it is, it's a nice to have a 2 of or a 3 of. I don't think I've seen a lot of lists that are playing 4 of, although I could be wrong. Maybe control lists are playing more of these. But yeah, it is card disadvantage, and white is notorious for having very poor card draw. So Solitude has its limited play, but it's also very good. It's just Solitude enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 other target creature. That creature's controller gains life equal to its power. Not a big deal. Getting rid of a creature is always going to be better than giving your opponent life. So I mean, it's not a big deal. It's my number 6. Number 5. Speaking of exiling, Path to Exile. I still think Path to Exile is over Solitude. I haven't built a deck yet where I want to play Solitude, really. Path to Exile is my card of choice. Maybe that's also because I play 3-color decks a lot, and you know, you don't really want to play Solitude in those decks. But yeah, Path to Exile is still that really mana-efficient removal spell for creatures. Nice exiling effect. Get around indestructible, damage-based damage, whatever it is. Damage-based removal. Not damage-based damage. And I think it's just an elegant solution to a lot of problems. Yeah, you ramp your opponent, but the land card comes in battlefield tapped. So in many ways, it's not that big of a problem if you do it at their upkeep. And Path to Exile is my number 5. Number 4, Fatal Push. And actually, you're going to see something, you know, starting from number 5, really, Path to Exile and on. All of these cards are essentially 1 mana. And that's just because Modern is most of Magic is all about efficiency. I would say competitive Magic is all about efficiency. And 1 mana is just very efficient. So here you have Fatal Push. Again, when I'm building a deck that has black and I'm looking for removal, Fatal Push is almost always going to be the card I go to. This is true for most pilots of most black decks. You're going to have some number of Fatal Pushes. Even with Murktide Regents going all over, and you have the Elementals deck, with, you know, creatures that have CMC above 4. Fatal Push is still relevant for the majority of the meta. You're still getting rid of the majority of the problematic cards, problematic creatures. And yeah, that's why Fatal Push is still your go-to choice for black for efficient removal, and is my number 4. Number 3, honestly, I wasn't sure where to put Lightning Bolt. It's very hard. It could just be always number 1 or even tier 0. In terms of removal, Lightning Bolt, we're never going to see a card that really gets as good and clean as Lightning Bolt in terms of dealing damage for 1 red mana. You know, oftentimes it is used for creature removal. Yes, it goes to the face a fair amount of times, but let's be honest, early game, it's going to your opponent's creatures. And again, it's my number 3, but could have been number 1. It could have been number 10. It really depends on what deck you're playing. But it's my number 3. I don't think there's much to say about Lightning Bolt. You know all about it. There you go. Number 2, Unholy Heat. Now, a lot of people think Unholy Heat is busted. I have to admit, it is slightly problematic in Modern because it is incredibly efficient. And it's 6 damage is just a lot of damage. Delirium is not very hard to get to, and obviously you're not playing this in a deck that, it's the only card that cares about the graveyard, right? You're playing this in a deck that's playing DRC, other Delirium requiring effects, whatever it is. Like, you're building a deck around Delirium or filling up your graveyard or using your graveyard resources. So it's not like a build around me card. It just slots into so many decks. And once it has Delirium active, well, 6 damage is just brutal. It kills almost anything. I think I like it. I think it's a nice control for planeswalkers and just large creatures. And I think there's enough restrictions on it where I don't think it's like that warping. Like, a lot of people are complaining about it because the DRC decks, or the Murktide decks, I should say. But ironically, it also helps control the Murktide decks because it can deal 6 damage to the Murktide region and potentially kill it. So I don't know. I think it's a give and take. Definitely my number 2. This is a great card. If I can consistently get Delirium in a deck that I'm building, I'm probably playing Unholy Heat as a removal spell, assuming I'm playing red, of course. Okay, my number 1. I don't play a lot of decks that have white, but this card is making me want to play more and more white, which is weird because I don't like that color, generally speaking, in Magic. White and black are not really the colors I enjoy. I'm a teamer guy, as many of you know. But Prismatic Ending, honestly, if this was instant speed, it probably would have been banned, or it just wouldn't have existed. This is just really, really, really good white removal. I have had to adjust my strategy for so many decks because of this removal card. I almost overlooked it. I mean, I kind of overlooked it and undervalued it when it was spoiled, or when it was initially spoiled at least. But this card is really good. I don't know what to say. I'm preaching to the choir because you're all saying Moldelver is kind of obvious, but maybe some of you don't understand how good this card is. For sorcerer, even if it's sorcery speed, for 1 mana, you're exiling, I should say, any non-land permanent. So 1 white, any 1 CMC or less, a non-land permanent is going bye-bye. It's not being replaced. Your opponent's not, gaining life, drawing a card, putting a token on the battlefield, getting a land, nothing. It's just gone. And then if you're playing this in a 2-3 color deck, 4 or 5, all the power to you. You expand the list of cards that you can target with Prismatic Ending. It's just elegant. Very elegant. All you need to do is hit your land drops, have a variety of color, and you're good to go. So Prismatic Ending, surprisingly, is my number 1. A color that I rarely play, white, and the best removal, at least in my mind right now, is in white, Prismatic Ending. I hate this card. I really hate this card when it's being played against me, but there you go. It's my number 1 pick. This is my top 10. Let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about my top 10 single target removal spells. What did I miss? What would you have put in your top 10 or your top 5 or top 3 or even your number 1 slot? I really like to hear from you. Stay tuned. I'm going to have another list very similar, but mostly with sweepers or multi-target removal spells coming up. It's going to be a bit more interesting. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe and hit that notification bell down below. Those few clicks go a really long way in helping others find my content and helps my channel grow. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook, share my content on social media. That also helps others find their way to my videos and spreads the word even further. And of course, if you like making money, check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of this video. In particular, check out the Patreon Rewards program. Basically works like this. You give me your Patreon dollars every month. I buy and open up sealed product on this channel using those dollars. And I send you back that money at the end of every year in the form of rares and mythics. You get 1 non-bulk rare or mythic for every consecutive month you've been a patron, and every card is worth anywhere between $3 and $15. But I mean, even if you lowball it at an average of $5 per card, you're at the very least getting your money back, but odds are you're getting even more. There are a lot more details on my Patreon page, so check it out. Thanks, and have a good one.